I think there's some parallax issues going on. So I'm going to shoot this at 50 yards, 100 yards, and 200 yards. One 5-shot group off the bench, and then one 5-shot group seated sideways as if I'm in a poor position and not mounting the rifle and not mounting the optic properly. I'll shoot all these groups, so that's 2, 4, 6 sets of 5, and I'm just going to go ahead and blow through it. This barrel's pretty heavy and pretty resilient, and I'll get back to you. Okay, I also failed to mention I'm gonna shoot this off of a clean cold bore, and I'm gonna clean between each round. Here is the 6mm off the bench at 50, 6mm seated at 50, off the bench at 100, seated at 100. We got a first round flyer here and a first round flyer here on our seated position shots. I'm gonna go to 200 yards. These groups are not as bad as I thought they would be for a seated position, but that first shot flyer is really doing me a number. And then, so now we're gonna move to 200. We're gonna go ahead and shoot the seated test, the off the bench test with the 6mm at 200. And then I will get seated on the ground and shoot the seated test. These targets are kind of in the shade, so I can't tell where I'm hitting. Okay, I'll clean, load up, and shoot my seated target. Okay, now I'm gonna go seated. The reason I'm doing this is to simulate kind of a weird position offhand shot, because they say the parallax on this scope has been really finicky. I've got it set dead on for 200 here, so there should be literally no parallax there, or at least a tiny minimal amount, no matter how. If I could see the picture, it should be legit here, but this scope seems to be not doing that well. Okay, that is it for the 6mm. We will collect this data. So this will be interesting because this particular group seated felt like the absolute best of the seated groups of the bunch. I was locked in pretty good. I had one shot that didn't feel that good, but I should have 4 bunched right up together. But the point of impact shift from off the bench is the thing I'm trying to illustrate here because of that parallax. So we will we'll see here. So here we've got 200 off the bench, which is pretty near a 1-minute group. And then here we've got 200 seated sideways. Same thing, I'm going to assume that this is a clean bore flyer, this is a clean bore flyer, but this all should put me on the money. So something else may be gunnies here. Okay, so this here's the 6mm UPC rifle, and I finished with that test to test the parallax error of this scope, because this gun shoots, I mean, anywhere between a minute and a minute and a half, minute and a quarter groups. I mean, every group I shoot with it. It's a very, very accurate rifle with the loads that I've got. The issues I'm having with this scope are that Sig advertised this scope as something that it wasn't. Sig advertised this as not a top of the line, but a premium scope, a near top of the line scope. And understandably enough for the price point, when you're buying a $600 optic, there is an amount of understanding there that this thing is not top of the line. This is not premium. My typical bottom of the line for scopes is like Vortex Viper. If I'm looking for something to serve this purpose, to serve a highly precision oriented role, which a varmint rifle, that is a highly precision oriented role. It just isn't what it's supposed to be. This is not a varmint scope. The reticle is very clear. I like the reticle for what it is. It does not have a Christmas tree in it. I'll try to get you guys an image of inside of this scope so you can see. It's an MOA reticle, and my brain thinks in inches and minutes, so that's why I'm so adamant about that. But the issue that I'm having is this parallax knob here. This parallax knob, for those of you who don't understand how optics work, parallax adjustment, it is your range focus. So, like, let's say I have this set at 100 yards and I'm shooting at 100 yards. If it is not in focus, then I adjust the diopter, which is underneath of here. I'll go ahead and untape this because I'm going to return this scope anyway. These caps are just junk, so I taped this on. It kept falling off. I'll untape this and I'll show you this process. Alright, so the process for dialing in a scope to your particular eye is to take your weapon to a known range, typically 100 yards, but let's say all you have is a 500 yard range, and the furthest distance you can do it, typically, the better. So let's say 500 yards is the range. We've got a known range of 500 yards, and you look through the reticle and you have to choose either the target is fuzzy or the reticle is fuzzy. Well, then you adjust this diopter. This is the diopter on a scope, and you adjust this diopter until both the image and the reticle are in perfect crisp relief. And then your scope is dialed for your eye. Now, I had some masking tape on this because this diopter, this thing is loose. I can turn that like one-fingered. With some difficulty, it's slippery. But it's, as you can see, it's very loose. Diopters usually take a little bit to crank on them. That's very loose. So I already put masking tape on the thing because the diopter was loose. That is normal procedure for any scope. Okay, but for this particular scope, when I set my parallax, my focus, for a known range, and then I adjust my diopter, and then I go to a second known range. I have a rangefinder, so these are verified ranges. And I set my parallax again, it will be out of focus again. So this is not a properly calibrated parallax adjustment.
As you focus a scope, what happens is it throws a distance between two lenses, and it focuses your parallax adjustment so that when you move your head, your crosshairs are still focused on the same target. So here we got Mr. Coyote. We're dead on his eyeball. And as you move your head and you move your eye, parallax is in adjustment. Nothing is perfect, so these crosshairs, they'll usually move. You move your head this way, the crosshairs will move that way a little bit. You move your head this way, the crosshairs will move that way a little bit. So they'll go a little bit like this. Typically less than a minute. Like my Vortex Viper PST, it is like a 1/4 minute of parallax error when the knob is calibrated for the proper yardage. This scope, no matter what the parallax is set at, it moves up to 3 minutes of angle, the crosshairs, from just not mounting the scope properly with my head. Now the problem is when I'm on the bench, I can mount the rifle perfect every single time. But I also shoot off of improvised rests. I shoot lent up against a tree. I shoot off the window of my pickup. I shoot off my mirrors. I shoot off my hood. I shoot in so many different improvised positions that I don't always mount my rifle the same, and it's impossible to mount it the same. I shoot prone. I shoot seated. I shoot kneeling. I shoot rested up against a tree off my hand. I shoot in some weird positions. And every shot that I miss, that's a dog that I'm never gonna put his hide in the freezer. That's a coyote gone forever. Never gonna get another shot at him. And for the amount that I practice, it's one of those things that when I have a miss or a couple of misses in a row, it very quickly becomes there's something wrong with the system, because I practice constantly and I practice a lot. This Sig scope it's junk. It's a lemon. It's going back to the factory. And I'm not going to ask them for a replacement or a repair. I'm going to ask them for my money back, because I know when I get a Vortex or a Leopold, I'm getting what my money buys, and they're not going to try to sell me on something that won't get the job done. And luckily it's just coyotes, right? Like, they sell, Sig sells this scope. This is a Sig Whiskey, I believe. But this scope was advertised as absolutely sufficient, if not exceeding industry standards, for police snipers, military type snipers. I don't think they can say military snipers unless they have contracts like in other countries, but military type applications, paramilitary snipers presumably, varmints, target shooting, all of these things. Well, PRS, if you guys know what that is, that's precision rifle shooting. And PRS matches include a lot of out of position shooting. And this scope would fail that. Not because I'm a bad shooter, not because my hand loads are off, not because I didn't put the work in, but because this optic fails in that area. If I was a police sniper, I mean, thank God I didn't fail in that application. Practice, 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 practice. Go to the range. Okay, this system is dialed. I am ready to go to work with this system. And then miss a do or die shot at potentially the expense of an innocent or a civilian life. No thank you. That is not acceptable. And so luckily my application is just varmints only, but this is not an acceptable optic for any of those applications, and so it's going back. That's my analysis on that. That's my review of that optic. It's getting pulled. This setup will end up with another probably 15 to 20. This is a 20 powered optic. And this weapon system will end up with probably another 15 or 20 power optic, and I will put my pistol red dot back on the top of this, because I've got a 50-yard zero on this and a 200-yard zero on this. And with this 6mm UPC, that's actually 50-yard zero and 200-yard zero are actually two different things, because this thing shoots so fast and so flat. You know, my 50-yard zero is actually a couple inches high at 200 still. It's almost like a 250, 275-yard zero. Haven't done the exact math on that, but it's somewhere in that ballpark. So I put the red dot on it for close-in shots. I really like the system. I really like the platform, but this optic is, it's going bye-bye. So that's my review of that. Kind of a bummer. I hate spending money on stuff and then having to hope that a company's gonna make right on it. I wrote an email to Sig. I haven't got a reply yet. I am gonna send this back no matter what they do. I have no use for a paperweight. I don't own a single range toy. I don't have range toys. So it's not like somebody could just say, well, just throw it on your range toy. Like, every weapon I own is a functionable weapon. These are not range toys, so that doesn't quite fly. That doesn't satisfy me. So this is going back, whether they're gonna make right with me or not. And if I got to eat $500 in order to do so, then I'll slander their name for till the end of time. And if I don't got to eat $500, then I'll tell everybody that they made it right with me by reimbursing me my money, because this scope does not do what it promised to do, which is have functioning features. That is not a functioning feature. The end. Turrets are accurate. The reticle is accurate. The glass is okay. It's past about 12 power. You get a lot of distortion and a lot of fuzz for having this giant objective lens. It does not gather light in low light conditions. This scope is almost useless. If you have even the slightest bit of sun at an angle glare, the scope is useless. So the glass is not that good, but it's good enough. Good enough for like a 12 power scope. I don't know why they put this quality of glass in a 20. But this scope does not satisfy my needs, and it does not have functioning features. So that's enough said about that. If you made her to the end, I appreciate it. This turned into kind of a drawn out deal. I just really don't want somebody to buy this thing, you know, one of these Sig Whiskeys, expecting it to do what it's advertised to do, because it doesn't. So I'll try and make a short out of this and get the pertinent information into a smaller package. But there's just no way to cram this much data into a 1-minute blurb of info. And the bottom line is that large claims require evidence, and I've got evidence that this thing just doesn't do what it's advertised to do. Sig is dropping the boat on this one. So hopefully a bunch of you guys don't end up buying one, and you can avoid this and just spend a little money and get a Vortex Viper.